It's a few hours before sunrise in the Gila National Forest, a stretch of wilderness in southwestern New Mexico. A biologist is crouched at the mouth of a wolf den. She tracked it here by a collar signal on the mother. Now she's working fast, in the dark, before the pack gets back. In her hands, a wolf pup, 8 days old, eyes still sealed shut. It was born 2,000 miles away, in a climate-controlled enclosure in Missouri. It has never felt dirt. It has never heard a real howl. This one pup carries part of what's left of an entire species, one that was once down to just 7 animals on the planet. She's about to place it among a litter of pups it has no biological connection to at all, and walk away in the dark. If this goes wrong, the wild mother could reject it, could abandon the whole den in alarm, pups and all. There's a narrow biological window for this to work. Once the pup is in, there's no going back. 7. By the 1970s, the Mexican gray wolf was almost gone from the planet. Ranchers had pushed cattle herds deep into wolf territory. As the deer and elk wolves had always hunted grew scarce, wolves turned to easier prey, grazing in open pastures instead. Ranchers answered by scattering poisoned bait across the range. Government trappers followed with rifles and steel traps, paid a bounty for every wolf they brought in. For decades, the government kept a single hunter stationed right at the Mexican border, whose only job was shooting any wolf that tried to cross north out of Mexico. The campaign followed them south, too. By then, Mexican wolves were already gone from the U.S. Mexico was the last place they still survived. In 1950, the U.S. government began shipping poison across the border, intent on eliminating what remained. By 1976, when the species was finally listed as endangered, there weren't dozens of Mexican wolves left in the wild. There were 7. The entire genetic future of a subspecies compressed into 7 animals. Every one of those 7 wolves would end up related to every wolf that came after, breed cousin to cousin for enough generations, and the same fragile combinations of genes start turning up again and again. Smaller litters and physical defects that show up more the closer the parents are related. Geneticists have a name for what that does to a species over time. They call it a countdown. The workaround. The same agency that had spent decades trying to erase the species now had a legal duty to save it. The Endangered Species Act had passed in 1973. The 1976 listing made it official. The Mexican wolf couldn't be hunted or poisoned anymore. It had to be brought back. In 1977, the U.S. and Mexico started a joint captive breeding program with those 7 wolves spread across a handful of zoos and conservation centers. It took over 20 years of careful pairing before anyone released a wolf back into the wild. In 1998, 11 Mexican wolves went back into the Blue Range Wolf Recovery Area, straddling Arizona and New Mexico. Those 11 wolves bred. Their pups bred. Over the next 15 years, a real wild population took hold in the mountains of Arizona and New Mexico, denning and raising litters on its own, the way wolves always have. It didn't fix the genetics. Every wolf in those wild dens still traced back to the same 7 founders. New wolves from captivity, some of the only genetically distinct ones left, don't fold easily into an existing wild population. Adult wolves released from captivity often struggle to find territory and pair up before another pack kills them for trespassing. Every year, the recovery relied only on adult releases. The wild population kept breeding within that same shrinking gene pool. So in 2014, the recovery team tried something stranger, the trick. The technique is called cross-fostering, and it works because of one blunt fact about wolves. A nursing mother doesn't count her pups. She feeds whatever is in the den. The same 7 founders didn't produce identical wolves, though. Which genetic pieces each wolf ended up with differs from animal to animal, wild or captive. For decades, the captive population was split across several separate breeding lines. Each one carefully managed to protect gene combinations that might otherwise disappear. The wild population, breeding within itself generation after generation, lost some of that variation along the way, the same way a photocopy of a photocopy loses detail each time it's copied again. The captive population never made that copy. As of 2025, it holds measurably more genetic diversity than the wild population, over a third more by the agency's own count. Cross-fostering moves that difference across. Every pup placed into a wild den carries gene combinations the wild population had already lost. Every spring, biologists watch the calendar twice over. Once for the captive females about to give birth at partner facilities, once for the wild females about to den in Arizona and New Mexico. When the timing lines up within a matter of days, a pup born in captivity, usually between 8 and 14 days old, gets flown out and driven to a remote den site. Then it's placed directly among a wild litter of the same age. Inside the den, the new pup burrows into the pile of littermates. At this age, none of them can see it arrive. Their eyes won't open for another few days, and their ears barely work yet. They have no way to tell one warm body in the pile from another. Within hours, the new pup smells like all of them, den and litter both. When the mother comes back, she noses through the pups the way she always does. She can't tell which one she gave birth to and which one was snuck into the litter while she was gone. She nurses all of them exactly the same. This program is still flying wolf pups across state lines and sneaking them into wild dens to keep a species alive. Is that the kind of hands-on intervention wildlife recovery should look like, or should nature be left to sort this out without people this involved? Let us know what you think in the comments. Confirming it actually worked doesn't happen right away. It happens months, sometimes years later, usually far from any den. On September 18, 2016, biologists captured an uncollared pup traveling with the Elk Horn Pack, named for a canyon in eastern Arizona's Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. He looked like any other young wolf in the pack. There was no way to tell, just by looking, whether he'd been born there or fostered in as an outsider years before. They gave him a quick exam and fitted a radio collar, then let him go. Weeks later, the lab results came back. His DNA traced to a litter born at the Brookfield Zoo outside Chicago. He hadn't been born to the Elk Horn Pack at all. He'd been fostered in as a newborn, and the pack had raised him as one of their own ever since. Since the program began in 2014, at least 148 pups have been cross-fostered into wild dens this way, including 5 more placed in June 2026. One of the earliest, a male pup fostered into the Panther Creek Pack back in 2015, was later confirmed alive by his radio collar, having left his birth pack to travel with a mate of his own, a wild-born genetic outsider who made it all the way to adulthood without a human touching him again after that first night. The wild population has grown from 11 wolves in 1998 to at least 319 as of the 2025 census. The last 10 years alone have been a straight, uninterrupted climb. The genetic diversity metrics the program tracks have improved alongside it, not just the raw number of wolves on the landscape. Not every fostered pup makes it, though, and the ones that survive get followed for the rest of their lives, recaptured and checked on year after year. Survival isn't guaranteed, and the program doesn't pretend otherwise. Wildlife advocates who track the effort closely have noted that, of the pups fostered since the technique scaled up, fewer than 30 are confirmed to have survived their first year in the wild, and only 18 have been confirmed to reach adulthood. Every fostered pup is a bet, not a certainty. Genetics isn't the only fight this species is having either. Mexican wolves are legally barred from ranging north of Interstate 40. When one crosses anyway, wildlife agencies track it down, capture it by helicopter or trap, and either drive it back south of the interstate or, if it keeps trying, take it into captivity. The reasoning. North of I-40 is where Mexican wolf range would start to overlap with northern gray wolves from Colorado and Utah. Officials worry that if the two interbreed, the Mexican wolf loses the genetic distinctiveness that got it listed as its own subspecies in the first place. Conservation groups make the opposite argument. Breeding with northern gray wolves, they say, is exactly the kind of outside genetic input this population needs. The same kind of genetic rescue the recovery program is currently engineering by hand through cross-fostering. The boundary line blocks the one source of new genes that would show up on its own. In 2022, a young female wolf crossed it anyway, searching for a mate. A 7th grader later won a naming contest and called her Asha, meaning hope. She was captured near Angel Fire, held in captivity, released, and then crossed the same line again the following year, traveling over 500 miles before she was caught a second time and paired with a mate in captivity. She was eventually released back into the wild with that mate and 5 pups of her own onto a managed ranch bordering a wilderness area. Federal officials named her family group the Quartz Pack. The advocates who had followed her journey for 2 years called them the Caldera Pack instead, after the mountains she kept trying to reach. Conservation groups still call the boundary that held her arbitrary. Ranching and agricultural interests, meanwhile, have pushed the opposite direction, pointing to the population's growth as evidence the species no longer needs the protections that made that growth possible. In January 2026, a bill to remove Mexican wolves from the endangered species list advanced out of committee with bipartisan support. For now, nothing has changed. The wolf is still listed. The recovery program is still running. Conservation groups argue letting Mexican wolves breed with northern gray wolves would fix the genetic problem on its own, no helicopters or foster pups required. Wildlife agencies argue that would erase the exact genetic distinctiveness that got this species protected in the first place. Which risk would you take? A wolf pup born inside a chain-link enclosure in Missouri is out there right now raising pups of her own, in a den nobody had to reach into this time. Every June, the flights go out again. Every winter, biologists comb the mountains for tracks and the flash of a collar on a trail camera, trying to confirm which fostered pups made it and which ones didn't. The 5 pups placed this June are already out there too, still small enough to be carried in one hand, already indistinguishable from the wild-born littermates they're growing up next to. In a few years, someone in a helicopter will find out whether they made it, whether their pups will be the next generation nobody had to fly in at all. A biologist can count a wolf and collar it. One can even be carried into a den that was never its own. None of that is the same as a pack denning on ground it picked for itself, or a herd nearby changing how it grazes just because that pack moved through the night before. The numbers say growing. Whether the rest of it is happening too is still an open question, one that's far from settled. If you want more stories like this one, the best thing you can do is like, share, and subscribe. It genuinely helps a small channel like this keep going.